everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Kooomo eMmerced series. We're here today to talk about payments and I guess the evolution in payments. Maybe just to frame this conversation a little bit, potentially in the last few years, there's been a big push on optimizing conversions, trying to get that extra point or two margin on products. But I think what's happened in the last year or so has put a real focus on different methods of operating generally. So more flexible logistics types, more flexible payment types, access to products through marketplaces. I think there's a lot of work going on there. So I think that does tie in quite well with our conversation today. So I'm Gary Hammond. I'm the head of product here at Kooomo. I'm joined by Philippa Mathews from Adyen. So Philippa, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. Thanks for having me. I'm Philippa Mathews. I've been working at Adyen for about 2.5 years out of our London office. For the most part of that time, I've been in our customer success team. So that's the kind of team helping businesses that use Adyen kind of grow, increase conversions and expand internationally.
Great. So look, I think what would be, again, another useful frame here would be, I guess, a lot of people still, historically for sure, and maybe there's still a prevailing thought of, I have my e-commerce platform and I need to connect it to a payment method of some sort. So I guess the traditional way, if you had, say, your PayPal, your MasterCard, your Visa, you may be looking at 3 extensions, 3 integrations into those services, which need to be maintained. I guess the PSP model is different. So would you be able to just maybe explain to us and give some context of exactly what a PSP is?
Yeah, sure. So PSP is a payment service provider and typically operates as a payment gateway, which is sort of the kind of terminal brought online. So, when you're putting your card details in on the website, you're using the payment gateway. But a payment service provider normally operates as a gateway and the processor behind that payment gateway, and typically will then connect out to various kind of risk services or and acquirers. Now that's obviously normally a lot easier and a lot cheaper for a business to connect to a payment service provider. Now, in Adyen's case, we're what we call a kind of full stack PSP, because we don't connect out to an acquirer, but we are actually an acquirer and a risk provider in-house. So we're kind of a full end-to-end solution that takes care of payments for a business. So you don't have to kind of worry about having all of those integrations and connections. And that's what makes us a little bit unique.
Yeah, and I think just to pick up on that a little bit from the platform perspective. Mm-hmm. I guess the model of multiple integrations into multiple payment types, especially as things evolve. I mean, digital wallets are now huge. There's buy now, pay later methods. There's all of these constantly evolving payment methods and localized payment methods and so on. So I guess from the platform point of view and kind of the e-commerce manager's kind of sanity point of view, it's possible, let's say, to have a single integration with a PSP rather than having to integrate all of those individual payment methods and just maintain that over time. So I think it really is one of those things about agility and the ability to grow and scale and talk to certain segments of the market at the right time. So showing the right payment methods in certain countries and just it kind of delegates a lot of risk and development work away from the platform itself.
Yeah, definitely.
So look, just with that in mind, then let's think about international payments. Okay. So local payment methods, local payment trends. So buy now, pay later. Again, the different types in different countries that people expect. So what's generally the rule of thumb for selecting local payment methods?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's definitely one, I think, especially before I came into the world of payments, I had no idea that you couldn't get away with using Visa and MasterCard everywhere. So, I mean, a really good example of that is, Adyen's a Dutch company, and in my first few weeks at Adyen, I went out to the Netherlands to stay there for a few weeks. I went into the Albert Heijn, which is their kind of local supermarket. I'd done a big food shop, get to the front, get to the till, ready to check out. and I can't use my Visa or MasterCard. And to be honest, I was so embarrassed coming to work for this payments company, and that had me totally stumped, because in the Netherlands they use Maestro branded debit cards, and kind of in the online space, only I think maybe a third of people in the Netherlands have a credit card. So in order to kind of access, if you've got Dutch customers coming to your website, you need to be able to and offer a online banking payment method called Ideal. And 80% of e-com transactions in the Netherlands go across that payment method. So this is when it becomes really important, right, to be offering localized payment methods in different markets. Because in the UK and Ireland, we're really used to using kind of cards, mainstream cards. When you start looking out into Europe and further afield, there's all sorts of alternative payment methods, digital wallets, online banking, open invoice payment methods, and kind of buy now, pay later as well. So it's really important to make sure that if you're going into those markets, or if you have customers coming to your site from those markets, that you're showing them the payment methods they want to pay in, because they also need to have trust, right? So if you get to a checkout and your way to pay isn't there, you're possibly going to drop off. And obviously we all want to avoid kind of cart abandonment, especially when you put a lot of resource into trying to get that customer there to put the products in their basket. You don't want to kind of fail at that last hurdle.
Exactly. And I mean, I did mention earlier on, and maybe it's a slightly subjective thought, that there's a trend towards kind of new ways of payments, logistics, products, warehousing, everything. There's maybe a move towards kind of integrating with those. That's not to say that checkout conversion is still not important. Of course it is. But I think one of the biggest reasons for checkout abandonment would not being able to, imagine the case in the Netherlands, that where's Ideal? It's not there, I'm off. So I think that's a good point. So I guess the question then would, like, how would a retailer in a platform like Adyen actually localize those payments and manage them?
Yeah, and that's kind of where the beauty of using a provider like Adyen comes in, because you might want to go into new markets, or you might discover that you actually have customers coming to your site from other markets, which might unlock an opportunity to actually increase conversion right elsewhere. So you need a provider, that can offer those payment methods kind of through one integration quite easily, but also who kind of has the knowledge on what payment methods you need where, because your e-commerce team are going to be really busy. You don't want to have to kind of do a ton of groundwork every time you move into a new market. So I guess using a provider like Adyen, like that, we're the payments geeks, so you don't have to be. So, if you want to go into Germany, Adyen is ready to help you accept SOFORT, to help you accept GiroPay. In the Nordics, where open invoice payment methods are really important, or in France, carte bancaire. If we talk about further afield in looking at the Far East, these kind of like Asian payment wallets, kind of WeChat Pay, Alipay really dominate. So if you've got customers, coming to your site, you want to be able to offer those, but it should be easy. It should be within that, one integration. You shouldn't have to, every time you go into a new market, connect to a local provider there and have new integrations and new contracts. But I guess equally what's important is offering the right payment methods, but also dynamically showing them to the right customer. So you don't want to clutter your checkout with kind of 15 payment methods, because that could also lead to cart abandonment, because it's just so confusing to look at. But offering the right ones based on, a customer comes to your site, that what currency they're paying in, where they're coming from. So offer them the right payment methods. So I would go on and see the ones that make sense to me. But if I'm coming and, shopping from the Netherlands, then I'll see the ones that make sense to me there.
Yeah, so I think it's really about intelligence and kind of, programmatically showing the right thing at the right time, but having the flexibility on the PSP side to dictate what should be available in each territory. So I guess we're talking about internationalization here. Probably get a bit more technical now around, a technical question. So the concept of processing cards locally in each market, and maybe what acquiring means and how this works.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so acquiring, I will do my best to explain. If I don't do very well, anyone in the audience can go and Google something like Adyen global acquiring, and we have a really nice blog with a great video that probably explains it a little bit better, but I will try my best now. So essentially, if you are a business operating with a legal entity within a region, so say you're a European business with a legal entity there, you'll be using a European acquirer, and that acquirer is essentially the party that sends the payment request to your customers' banks and hopes to receive the funds in return in order to settle to you. So if you're in Europe and your acquiring bank is in Europe, any transactions coming from Europe will be what we call acquired locally. If they're coming from outside of Europe, say from the US, that will be classed as cross-border. Now, cross-border payments have, I guess, two disadvantages. One is that they tend to perform worse than locally, just because, you know, a bank might go, oh, I'm not happy with, you know, Gary paying further afield. I'm not sure if this is him. I'm going to decline it. So often cross-border transactions have a lower conversion rate, but also they're more costly. The kind of schemes and the banks charge more for cross-border transactions. So acquiring locally is really great. If you only have one entity, then anything outside of that region, you know, will be cross-border. Now, if you have multiple legal entities, so if you do have a legal entity in the US, then technically, yes, you can acquire locally in the US and make use of cheaper rates and better conversion, but you need a provider that can help you acquire locally there. So if you're using a payment provider that only has, you know, acquiring capabilities in the region you're in, when you want to acquire locally in the US, you're going out to look for another provider again in order to kind of reap the benefits. So ideally, you want to use a provider that can, you know, help you acquire globally. So when you do grow your business, you're not having to reach out to kind of local connections, new integrations, new contacts in each market. So local acquiring, if you can do it, if you are expanding and have legal entities, it is definitely the way to go.
Okay, great. And you know, another thing to move into is, look, you work in this space. Most people will be familiar with what I'm about to say, but the amount of regulation changes coming, not just from, in our case, the European Union, the divergence now that may happen in the UK scenario with the EU, all the credit cards, like the secure payments, 3DS2, PSD2, and so on. So, you know, how would kind of a PSP kind of help people with these kind of key regulatory issues?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. And I would say it's kind of, that's one of the benefits of using like a PSP or a payment partner like Adyen, is that they should really be taking a lot of this pain on your behalf. So you shouldn't have to, you know, think about things too much. You should be guided by payments experts who can, you know, tell you when you need to be ready with 3DS in various regions, that can help you prepare for kind of, you know, the Payment Service Directive 2, which is adding that kind of second layer of authentication on payments within Europe. So definitely one to kind of, a provider should really help, definitely help you with that, especially with also the changes in regulations. You know, we talked earlier about, you don't need to have someone on your team that's that like payments geek that's constantly getting bogged down with changes in regulations in different markets. So like an example of this, I think last year in Sweden, where open invoice payment methods are really popular, the Swedish government came out with kind of rules that said, on a checkout where you are showing you're showing your checkout to Swedish shoppers. So this applies to businesses kind of operating anywhere. If you've got Swedish customers come to your site, you must display non-credit options further up the checkout than credit options. So, you know, we're able to do that, like within, if you're using, you know, integration into Adyen, we'll make sure that we are kind of meeting those guidelines. Or if you're kind of customizing an integration, we'll advise you to make sure that you're, you know, doing things the right way within the regulations of each country, because the payments landscape constantly changes, rules change, regulations change. So it's really, yeah, important to kind of use a provider that can help you stay on top of that.
Yeah, look, I think every year, I guess there's a curveball thrown at us around some new rule condition. But when you're talking that kind of hyper localized context of Sweden, in that scenario, I mean, not everyone's going to know that. And then they're in breach of local regulation rather than an EU maybe regulation, which is well understood because it's well publicized. So
Yeah,
you're right. And
exactly.
that comes down to credit card debt issues they have there, where they've basically said that has to be the way it is now. So, encourage the debit or the offline.
Yeah, payments is only, I guess, for, an e-commerce team, payments is one piece of the puzzle. So you want that taken care of by your payment provider, but then outside of that, there's like fulfillment, there's VAT. Like I know Kooomo helps kind of a lot in those departments as well. So using partners to take that, take care of that for you is important.
No, I agree. So I guess we've kind of talked there just kind of broadly about payments, but again, the evolution of buy now, pay later as an example here. So Adyen is basically the facilitator of accessing these payment types. Okay, but could you just talk a little bit about the buy now, pay later model and how you guys see that's going and kind of your capabilities around that?
Yeah, definitely. So buy now, pay later has absolutely increased in popularity over the last few years. And it essentially probably comes in two flavors. So you've got open invoice, which is the ability to, to purchase something, but actually not pay for it there and then, but instead pay for it maybe in 14 or 30 days time. And then you've got kind of buy in installments. So paying off a purchase kind of over time in equal installments. There are some really popular, payment methods are gaining traction in the UK. Everyone's kind of heard of Klarna, ClearPay. Now, what a lot of businesses in the UK and Ireland might not realise is that when you go then outside of that market, they're not the only businesses in that space that exist. There's loads, across Europe. You've got kind of Afterpay that operate Australia, New Zealand, Zip, Affirm, RatePay in the US. In Europe, you've got Oni. So offering buy now, pay later methods are brilliant, but there's a lot of them. So a provider like Adyen can essentially offer these to you. And then as a business, you can make the decision, look at those payment methods and decide kind of which ones suit your target audience, your business type, and also the markets you're operating in order to have the right one on your checkout that makes most kind of sense for you.
Yeah, and look, I think in the retail space, fashion, kind of fast fashion, that's a huge segment for everybody who works in e-commerce, right? But I think we're seeing a lot more of these tactics being used now that may have previously been used for kind of high ticket items, like fridges or something, a computer or something. So absolutely, I think it's something that e-commerce managers should be looking to explore, experiment with. Because yeah, I mean, if you can offer something at like €24 every month instead of the 100 now, I mean, it's worth checking.
Yeah, definitely. It gives the option for a consumer, right, that wouldn't necessarily normally maybe buy something either, to decide actually they can if they're going to spread the payment out. So definitely worth considering for a lot of retailers out there.
Yeah, of course. So again, just on the international theme, then, what's important for kind of the retail space? It's, let's say, baby brands, fashion, kind of accessories. I mean, around the payment space, like what are you seeing as important?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about localization of payment methods. That's also really key. Another thing, and I kind of should have mentioned this right at the beginning, when I said like Adyen is a full stack provider, but we do that globally, but we also do that across all channels. So we do that online and in store. It's really important as, I guess, a retailer to keep up with like customer demand. Now, if you do have both channels, so if you have stores and online, and you operate online, then it is really important to be flexible, I think, in that customer journey. So, I work, well, as I'm coming back into the office more and more now, and I work, on Oxford Street, I want to be able to take something that I bought online back in store and just, receive the funds back much more quickly than I would, by taking something to the post office. So that is that's really hard to do unless you're using a provider that spans both channels, where the kind of payment data is shared between channels, between online and in-store. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to make that happen, especially when you start thinking about kids and baby verticals, where consumers have been buying, push chairs or carry cots or prams, or really bulky items. They are often more convenient to drive to the local store to take it back, rather than to parcel up and to kind of heave that down to the post office. So providing a omni-channel experience to customers, kind of unified commerce is what we talk about a lot, and just being really flexible to customer demands. I think there's definitely been a switch in terms of customers kind of being at mercy of the stores, where you just have to do what brands are doing, kind of meet brands where they are. And now more and more, the kind of power is switching to the consumer, and brands need to meet them where they are. So that's, in the channels that they're operating in, and with the payment methods that they expect to see.
Yeah, and look, I think as well, I mean, the point I'm about to make has probably been said on every e-commerce webinar in the last year, but I think also e-commerce managers are maybe finally getting the buy-in from the business about their not just last on the chain after all the brick and mortar stores. So you're right. I mean, even obviously we've probably progressed 10 years in the space of, well, 2 months early last year. But I guess the concept of omnichannel and, everything is the channel. There isn't like these really, we call it omnichannel, but essentially it's where you sell, right? You can sell in the store, you can sell online, and bringing these things together. So yeah, I think obviously the cost returns is phenomenal, and it can be prohibitive to even sell some things if you have to then cover the cost of the return, especially if it's more expensive items. So I think you're right to say that the omnichannel, as maybe it's always been called, is probably just going to become the channel where there is brick and mortar and a digital presence. So again, just I want to touch on a couple of things. So I think timely for us anyway is on our product side, we have quite a big upgrade to our subscriptions coming in the next short term, next few weeks. So could you maybe just talk about the subscription model? And it's on the rise everywhere. And but let's say health and beauty, that's always been kind of popular with, like your buy our toothbrush heads and get them every 3 months. Mm-hmm. But how this is crossing over into more traditional everything, really. So let's say fashion, for example.
Yeah, well, the kind of subscription piece links on really nicely to what we were just talking about, with kind of power switching over to the consumer and meeting them where they are, and kind of providing convenience or providing more personalization in purchases. And like subscription fits that really nicely. So you're quite right. It uses subscriptions. There's lots in the digital space that we're all familiar with, and things like flower deliveries or food boxes. Now you see it for everything. Washing tablets or pet food or baby stuff or like whatever it is, you name it. There is some subscription service for it, and I think that is because customers really kind of expect more personalization. I think especially over the last year. That's definitely a way that kind of brands have managed to kind of attract new consumers, but to also, to kind of keep them. So I've got a few stats on subscriptions. So, which is kind of mad if you think about maybe the subscriptions that you had 5-10 years ago. Now in the US, the average consumer has 12 paid for subscriptions, and then within that, millennials have 17, which is phenomenal. The average British household has 7, and that was a 50% rise during the first lockdown. And I think some of that also comes to kind of maybe an increase in like self-gifting. I think in the last year, we've seen, more and more brands kind of opening subscription services, because everyone sort of wanted to treat themselves and have, a box arriving monthly, whether that be a beauty box. But certainly it's coming into the fashion space. We see, brands such as Stitch Fix, who combine both the subscription element and that personalization. I think, you pay money monthly and they put kind of tailored clothes suggestions for you. Similarly, things like Fabletics, even bigger clothing, like online companies, have been doing subscriptions also for a while in terms of like Premier delivery. So often you wouldn't think about that as a subscription service, but it is, right? If you're saying, opt in for a Premier delivery service, again, it's like, meeting the consumer where they are and increasing that kind of personalization and interaction with the brand. If you've got that, Premier hat on with a certain brand, you're definitely going to probably increase interaction with it and probably your spend as well.
Yeah, and I think just maybe from our perspective on subscriptions, there's really 3 types. So there's the kind of traditional, let's say the toothbrush and the toothbrush heads. So, just to make it at the point of purchase, it's like, okay, these toothbrush heads apparently last every 3 months. I'll get it every quarter forever, or for a year, and I'll make my mind up again. But then we're seeing these curated services, like get your meal kits delivered. And this is an opportunity for people to sell thematic kits. So someone could just sign up for a subscription for send me this kind of thing every month. So if you have a dog, for example, it's a certain type of breed, you might want to send the terrier kit out to people. And then, as you said, it's really kind of around the Amazon Prime model, is buying better service, buying benefits. So look, I think, yes, this is something that does have a deep integrate, or like there's considerations around this for the platform and the payments, because the system needs to be able to generate that order every month, and to then, in this case, instruct Adyen, this needs to happen, and the invoice needs to happen, and so on. So yeah, like I think it's interesting, it's tangible, it's something people can do and start exploring with. And as I mentioned, the Kooomo will have a release around an upgrade to our subscriptions imminent. So it'd be interesting to see what our merchants do with it. Returns, okay. The kind of, we've touched on this anyway, but returns processes kind of on an international level. I think we may have kind of covered this already, but any maybe additional thoughts you might have on that?
I mean, I guess all I would say really in terms of making the returns process easier on an international level as far as payments is concerned, because I know there are lots of headaches, especially with Brexit, with fulfillment and then also returning stuff to warehouses. On the payments piece, all I can say is that using a global provider, so the payments is all taken care of by one partner, is going to save you a lot of time, and using a partner that can accept multiple currencies, settle in multiple currencies, and that will also help. I know we were also talking about kind of before this, we were talking about like buy now, pay later and making returns. Again, like that's something that's kind of quite easy for businesses to do if they're using a payments provider that then connects out to these buy now, pay later products, because the returns work in a really similar way. It's the beauty of those providers that they take the kind of burden of managing the partial payments or partial repayments, whereas you as a business just see a sale or a free refund in the same way that you would see any other card payment. But yeah, so from the payment side of things, keep things simple, using a provider that can help with everything. But I know that there's a lot of headaches outside of that with VAT, fulfillment. Don't know if you can comment on the way that kind of Kooomo can help with that.
Well, look, I think, yeah, I think that there's again, EU landed legislation. I mean, there's kind of harmonization and changes about how VAT gets applied at certain thresholds and so on. So look, yeah, like just like yourselves, our platform is international focused at its core. I mean, everything is based on what we call zones and localizations, where you can basically spin a different flavor of your e-commerce configuration around prices, VAT, warehouses, payment methods per territory. So I do think the two go hand in hand quite nicely. So what I might just do before we maybe start summing up the call is just if you could bring a bit of life to some of the things we've talked about, and maybe kind of talk about some of the retailers that have applied diverse payment methods in their strategy and the success that they've had from it.
Yeah, one I would like to talk about is Lifestyle Sports. So you probably know them. They're a big kind of household name in in Ireland and in Northern Ireland. So they joined Adyen, and then they used the data that we provide them to say, oh, look, you're getting some traffic from the Netherlands, France, Germany, and they kind of use that to make really informed decisions about what payment methods to add. So that's, you know, Ideal in the Netherlands, Sofort in Germany, and Carte Bancaire in France. And Carte Bancaire is quite an interesting one because it's essentially a local card scheme. Now, most cards are co-branded with Visa. So if you accept Visa, that card should be able to, you should be able to accept it, but not all are. So the ones that aren't co-branded with Visa, if you're not accepting Carte Bancaire, that's going to, you know, be an immediate decline. So that's, you know, that's a really, that was really nice for them. I think, you know, they were able then to see great conversion. A customer I worked with just a couple of months ago, again, in their first month, I think we looked at the data and I suggested, hey, you're getting a lot of French traffic. Have you thought about adding Carte Bancaire? And within the last, within, you know, as soon as they set it up, within kind of 2 to 3 weeks, they'd seen about 500 sales made through that payment method, which sometimes they also it might be cheaper than actually processing it via Visa. Another example is Brompton Bikes. So they're quite a long-standing partner of Adyen's, and they, I think, went live in 6 markets within 3 months, and they're now live in 45 countries. It was really important for them to meet consumers in each market in the most appropriate way. So kind of, you know what they're like in Europe, really iconic British brand, really expensive bikes. You know, people want to go into store and interact a lot. Now, when you take Brompton into China, you've got customers that have no fear in dropping £2,000 or £3,000 on within a kind of digital app on WeChat. So there's 600 million users of WeChat in China, and the vast majority of transactions go through those apps. So they have to, meet their Chinese customers, where they want to pay, which is kind of on those channels. And maybe the final one to talk about is Le Chameau, the really high-end boot brand. So when they were looking at expanding into the Nordics, so Nordics and Benelux and Germany, where traditionally open invoice was probably started more with popularity there, and obviously now we see people wanting to pay in installments everywhere else. But that was really important for their business model because they have high quality and quite a high price point, but they need to let the goods speak to themselves. So when customers are buying online, the ability to make a purchase and pay for it later means that they can get the boots, and then the customer can see in really high quality, they're made by hand by boot makers with really fine materials, and the items with the customer, but potentially that customer wouldn't have purchased if they didn't have the option to add and to have the open invoice payment method, which meant that they could pay for the good after trying it first. So there, I guess, all sort of different examples of adding various payment methods, but for different reasons. So either for to attract in markets, or to increase the kind of spending habit, or to convert a customer that maybe wouldn't have converted without that payment method.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah. Look, before I summarize, I just want to, any attendees who would like to ask any questions, you can use the Q&A function. There is one there, which I'll get to. But I think I kind of like that we've said a lot today, right? And I would like to kind of maybe distill it down to the idea of payments should not be seen as a burden. And I've experienced with CMS platforms, other e-commerce platforms, and often it's just okay, we now have to update our thing for 3D Secure 2. The developer's gone AWOL. It's this is a pain. It's it was very much a pragmatic thing we need to do, like buying our insurance every year. It's not a nice thing to do, but we just do it. I think what we're discussing today is actually making this a kind of a driver of revenue and a source of good data to allow us to be international. So, at a high level, I'm just going to ask a couple of things. that might just summarize what we do. So, retailers, let's say, who are new to the concept of PSP, who are interested in understanding it or evolving their current implementation of it, where do they start? Okay, so I know we kind of touched on it, but like, what should be the starting point to actually do something that is actionable and not overwhelming?
Yeah, I would say, well, when it comes to choosing a PSP, do your research. Definitely make sure that you find one that suits your business now, but also is prepared for when you want to grow. When it comes down to looking at alternative payment methods, have a few questions in mind. Like, I would always advise, start with what you need. So, if you're a domestic brand in the UK and Ireland, that's cards, that's some Amex, that's Apple Pay, and maybe some buy now, pay later options if it suits your business. Start with that, and then use kind of data to drive your decisions. So if you're starting to see customers come from abroad, where are they coming from? What payment method suits them? Or if you have plans to expand into new markets, then consult that payment provider, ask for their help, ask for what payment methods they can support in that region. Can they support the right ones? Because, as we've discussed for the last half an hour, not supporting the right payment methods can then have, a serious hit on conversion in those markets. I'd say there's a few kind of key questions to ask yourself when adding alternative payment methods. And it's really sort of what are you looking to achieve with it? So if you're looking to achieve, expanding to a new customer base, you're looking at local payment methods. If you're looking to increase basket value, then maybe look at some buy now, pay later methods. If you're looking to position your brand in a certain way, Amex might be really important, or something like Amazon Pay. Or finally, if you're looking to increase the frequency of purchases and you want people coming back and it be really seamless, then digital wallets are going to be really important. So the likes of having kind of Apple Pay on your checkout. So international expansion can be really, really easy for a small business. You've just got to have the right tech behind you and the right partner behind you as well.
Great. No, thanks very much. I'm just going to maybe touch on some of the Q&A questions, but again, before we finish, I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
So one question came in here, and I think it's probably a question for you, Philippa. So somebody has asked, when it comes to optimizing payment methods for mobile shopping, are there kind of specific considerations that we need to make, such as the options, the prioritization, and as we mentioned, maybe wallets, but maybe I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to mobile shopping, it's a great question. Wallet payment methods are key. So Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, whatever it is, you need to really make it convenient if you want that customer to come back. I say this to retailers all the time. I do remember if I check out on my phone, whether it was easy or whether it was a pain, and then next time I want that item or whatever it is, I'm going to know to go back there because it was really easy. I think it's something like by 2023, 52% of e-commerce transactions will be made via digital wallets. So if you are a business where you expect people to be making payments via mobile, then yeah, accepting digital wallets is super key, and making that easy, right? And someone's just popped another question in on that, which I'm happy to answer, which was, is Apple Pay a less fraudulent payment method? Apple Pay is really useful because within that payment method itself, you use biometrics, right, to check out. So you're either using your thumbprint or you're scanning your face, and the banks love that because for them, it's very, very unlikely that person checking out is not who they say they are. So it's very guaranteed to never result in a chargeback, to not be fraud, and because of that, it's definitely preferred by the banks. And quite often when we look at the data from merchants that use Adyen before they add Apple Pay and then after they add Apple Pay, we do tend to see a little bit of an authorization uplift. And that's just purely because maybe there was a transaction that if it hadn't been authenticated by Apple Pay, wouldn't have been accepted, but with Apple Pay now it has been. So it's definitely, I'm not sure if like less fraudulent is the term, but it definitely will increase conversion because it is more secure, and you're more likely to get an acceptance from the bank.
Yeah, look, just on that, I mean, in the last, let's say, 5 years, we've seen how people pay for things now, particularly in the last year. Like, when was the last time most people were in ATM? I mean, most people are tapping their phones, tapping their watches. And again, let's come back to the kind of the increasing the conversion rates. Much easier just to put your fingerprint in to pay instead of filling out a form on a mobile. It's certainly
It's going to become easier and well, brands will have to make it easier and easier to check out. If you think of how seamless a transaction is when you step out on Uber, you're not doing anything then, right, to complete payment. Storing card details within apps as well is definitely becoming more prevalent. Just making sure that, to a consumer, payment sits in the background. Like, it shouldn't be something that they have to think very much about. It should just happen, make it really easy and as frictionless as possible.
Yeah, and again, this just goes back to the concept of the PSP, just making this technology available and not having to do standalone integrations. Right. There was one more question there I might just touch on. It was more to do with subscriptions, but maybe it was answered after it was asked. But someone has asked if there are examples of fashion retailers, how do they approach subscriptions? So, you want to encourage subscriptions on things, but aren't necessarily need for fulfillment.
Yeah.
So look, I guess one thing is that a subscription is generally a promotion. So there's generally a price incentive at the start to sign up for a subscription. But as I mentioned earlier on, the kind of the better service model, so the Amazon Prime equivalent, if you're at scale, or like selling benefits. But then again, it really is about this curation. So you can sign up for a kit for everything. Like you can get records delivered to your house every month. You can have food delivered to your house every week. You can have whatever. So I think in the fashion space, it could be seasonal. It could be, buy the look for £100 or euro every month or every 4 weeks or 4 months, whatever it is. We will send you something we think you will like. So I think that kind of personalization helps generally build a relationship as well, which is hard to do. Get the long-term value, kind of get the brand loyalty. So I think there's a huge opportunity there at very little risk to start experimenting with kind of curated subscriptions in this context.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, like, subscriptions can and should increase that kind of lifetime of the customer's interaction with the brand. But you've also got to make sure you do it right, because normally a subscription might be slightly less than they would spend if they were just coming to your site and doing a one-off purchase, but hopefully you're going to keep them over time and keep them spending with your brand. But you've got to, keep it personalized, keep it really high quality service, because if a customer has a bad experience, then you've dropped off and you've kind of lost them for life. So I think the brands that are doing it really well, things like, Stitch Fix, Fabletics, making it personalized, as Gary said, is really key for for maybe a fashion retailer approaching subscriptions in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and look, there's a ton. When it comes to subscriptions, it is extremely complicated, especially like with the likes of Kooomo, where somebody might be selling in different territories, shipping from different warehouses. How do you manage the returns? What if you want to, there's a lot. Like, every platform has its own flavor of how they do it. And I think we'll be talking more about that in future anyway. Look, I might leave it there. We're right on time, which is a first. So thanks very much, Philippa, for your time. And yeah, hopefully the people got some good understanding.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.